Under-seasoned food is probably the most common mistake in home cooking. Do we salt at the end? The frustrating thing is, it's exactly what most recipes tell you to do. Season to taste. Adjust seasoning before serving. That advice isn't wrong, but it's about 20% of the story. If you're only salting at the end, you're not seasoning your food. You're salting the surface of it. And there's a significant difference. Today, I'm going to show you the difference by building one composed dish from scratch. A pan-roasted pork chop on a butternut squash puree with parboiled and pan-finished potatoes and sautéed chard. 4 components, 4 different answers to the question of when and how to salt. Let's go. We start with pork chop. The one on the left went into the fridge pre-seasoned last night. The one on the right is getting seasoned right before the sear. Both have been patted dry. Here's why it matters. Salt is hygroscopic. It draws moisture toward itself. When you salt a piece of protein, liquid initially comes to the surface. You've probably seen this. Little beads of moisture that appear on a salted steak. That's osmosis doing its first job. But given enough time, the moisture gets reabsorbed. And when it does, it carries dissolved salt back in with it. The salt penetrates the muscle fibers. The chop on the left is seasoned in a way that a chop salted 5 minutes before cooking never will be. And there's a second benefit. The surface dries out, and that will produce a great crust during the sear. Alright, pan up to temperature, same test as last week. Water bead skates were ready to go. Neutral oil in. That contact, that sound. Dry surface, hot pan. The crust starts forming from the first second. When I flip the first side, you can visibly see that the salt crystals on the surface of the chop that wasn't pre-seasoned. The one that was has allowed the salt to penetrate the meat and will be seasoned within. It will make a difference in the final result. Butter goes in once I've gotten my initial sear. Thyme, rosemary, sage, garlic. Tilt and baste, the same technique we used last week. Once you have it, it works on everything. The seasoning lesson here is simple, but it takes some pre-planning. Think about seasoning the night before, not the hour before. But even 30 minutes can make a meaningful difference on a thicker cut. The earlier the salt goes on, the deeper it goes in. The puree teaches a different lesson, and it's the one I think most home cooks have never been told explicitly. I'm roasting the squash first, halved, scooping out the seeds, then sliced for maximum surface area for browning. About 45 minutes at 400 degrees. The salt draws moisture from the flesh to the surface, and as that moisture evaporates in the oven, the sugars will concentrate and caramelize. The seasoning and the browning are connected. The salt helped make both happen. But here's where the lesson really lives. The roasted flesh goes into the blender. At this point, it's well seasoned, but it's not the end of the process. It's the beginning of the next stage. I'm adding more components to the puree: butter, aromatics, cream. These will enhance the flavor, but without adjusting the seasoning, it will also dilute the seasoned roasted butternut squash. Every time you add something to this puree, butter, cream, water, stock, you're not just adjusting texture, you're diluting the seasoning that was already there. This is why tasting after every addition isn't fussiness, it's just accuracy. A lot of home cooks season at the beginning of making a puree and assume it holds. It doesn't necessarily. The dish keeps changing, and the seasoning has to change with it. Now onto the potatoes. Parboil first, then finish in the pan. The result is better than straight roasting. Creamy inside, nice crusty outside, and 2 distinct seasoning opportunities. Seasoned water, same principle as pasta water. The potato absorbs this liquid for the entire parboil. If the water is unseasoned, the potato comes out bland at the core, not a small pinch, more like a heavy 4-fingerful. I'm going to cook this through so that I can give each potato a slight smash before going into the pan to crisp up. Drain, Then steam dry before giving each potato a slight smash. The drying eliminates surface moisture, and the smashing maximizes surface area contact to the pan. Remember that moisture is the enemy of a good sear. Pan finish in butter. Dry surface, hot fat. The crust forms fast. A light pinch of salt in the pan. The parboiled water has already done the heavy lifting. You're just finishing. 2 stages of seasoning. The water handled the interior, the pan handles the crust. Neither one alone gets you where you want to be. The chard is the one I'm most interested in because it's where the lesson gets complicated, and where most advice about early seasoning falls apart. Most of what I said today is salt early, give it time, season aggressively. The chard is the exception, and understanding why tells you more about cooking than any single rule can. I've got a full bunch of Swiss chard. It's mostly water, and when it hits a hot pan, that water leaves fast. Watch what happens. That full bunch just became a quarter of its starting volume. If you had seasoned that chard aggressively at the start, when it looked like it needed a lot of salt to cover all that surface area, the salt would now be concentrated into a fraction of the food. You can't undo that. The right approach, a light hand when it goes in, let it wilt, then taste when it's collapsed. That's when you know where you actually are. Salt is a running conversation with the ingredient. Some things want salt early and often. Leafy greens with high water content want restraint at the start and adjustment at the end. Add more if it needs it. Adjust from a position of information, not assumption. Learning the difference is how you stop cooking by habit and start cooking by attention. Everything's ready. We'll plate up and add salt to finish, but I want to be specific about what this is and what it isn't. Finishing salt is not a rescue operation. If the pork chop wasn't seasoned yesterday, if the puree wasn't tasted and adjusted, if the potatoes sat in plain water, then the finishing salt on the plate won't fix any of that. What it does, when the dish underneath is already right, is add a final register, texture, brightness, and the visual punctuation of a visible flake. 1 dish, 4 components, 4 different answers to the same question. The pork chop, season early. Give the salt time to move from the surface into the meat. The puree, season at the start of roasting, then re-season after every addition that changes the volume. The potatoes, season the water they cook in, then the fat they finish in. The chard, hold back at the start, taste when wilted, and adjust from there. That's what seasoning actually is. Not a rule, but a conversation with whatever you're cooking. The ingredient tells you what it needs, when it needs it, and by how much. Your job is to pay attention. I'd love to know which of these 4 surprised you the most. Drop it in the comments. And if you cook this dish this week, tell me how it goes. If this is the kind of explanation you've been looking for, please subscribe. One technique, properly understood. That's the whole point of this channel. I'll see you next week.